welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Jessica from Syosset Library, and I am excited to be introducing our guests today for Turn the Page podcast. It is actually two authors who write under one name, although you have both written your own books under your own names. Cassidy Lucas is the name that you're writing under together. Would you like to introduce yourselves individually? We could start, I guess, with Caeli, because you came on first.
Thanks.
Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, I'm
Awesome.
so impressed.
Okay.
So I'm Caeli, Wolfson, Widger. And as you mentioned, Jessica, I've written a couple of more literary fiction novels under my own name. And the first was called Real Happy Family, I think published in 2014. And then another called Mother of Invention. Was, I believe, published in 2018. And let's see, what else by way of introduction? Of course, Julia and I both live in Santa Monica. And
Yes.
I have 3 kids and a camping trailer parked in my driveway where I write and do podcasts. And yeah, just trying to get through it like everyone else.
So really quick, Mother of Invention, am I mistaken? Did you get kind of like a shout out from Margaret Atwood?
I did.
That's
And
impressive.
I just very quickly, I'm very proud to have gotten it because she's declared that she doesn't blurb. And in fact, on her website, she has a poem that she's written to any authors who might be considering asking her for blurbs. And it's just a very clever rejection in verse. So I wrote a poem in verse that sort of mimicked her rejection, humbly asking if she might make an exception, and found her mailing address and just mailed the handwritten poem to her. And then she so generously and amazingly gave me a shout out. And when the email came in, I was driving on the 405. It was sort of a classic LA moment, and started, screaming and crying in standstill traffic. So.
It's funny though, because in many ways, a lot of her literature, screaming and crying, is like the emotion I get from it. So
exactly. No, it was actually quite
the happy
right.
version of that is awesome.
Right. Yeah, no, you're right. It was appropriate.
And Julia, you also live in Santa Monica. Yeah.
And I want to add that Caeli's she has an MFA in poetry. So it was a good poem. Sorry, my pandemic puppy is barking right now.
No worries.
Someone is coming to take him downstairs. So Caeli and I actually met in Brooklyn at the Sackett Street Writers Workshop, and which is a workshop that I founded in 2002. And Caeli was one of the first students who answered my Craigslist ad. So we became friends through this workshop experience and learned how to write fiction together. And then years later, Caeli and her family moved to Santa Monica. And then my family made the mistake of visiting them in Santa Monica. And as soon as we got back on the plane, we started sort of brainstorming how we could get back there. And we loved living in Brooklyn, but it had become so expensive, and we rented and we kept losing our leases and having to move every year or two. So we made the leap, and it was this, I guess, like a positive middle-age crisis move. And I also published 2 somewhat more literary novels, Cutting Teeth, which is set on Long Island.
Yes.
And since I grew up there, Long Island was really the focus of my first 2 books, and the Gypsy Moth Summer, which is a fictionalized version of Long Island, because I wanted to write about the old Grumman aircraft factories.
Which is right down the street from
Yeah.
here, and I drive by it on my way home from work every day.
So, so it was really exciting it was actually Caeli's idea. We were back in New York for the book launch of the Gypsy Moth Summer, and we had just gone to some fabulous, I don't know, literary event on a rooftop in Williamsburg. And we were in a cab, and Caeli said, "Let's write a thriller together." And I said, okay, not thinking she would circle back, but she did. And we're pretty excited that we did it, that we were able to write a book together, and hopefully that it's has a strong, thrilling plot that keeps readers guessing, because that's what we love to read right now.
So you both had spent some time in New York, and Julia, you again were one of our neighbors over in Huntington, very close to Syosset. So the title of the book is Where You Live. That's a very, considering what happens in the book, that's a bit ominous. So this is the story of a lot of things, but it begins when one of the main characters, Letty or Letitia, finds her brother, Zach, who was a personal fitness trainer, dead in a gym. And they live parallel but very separate lives for their own reasons, and the story just kind of spirals back and forth to why this happened. How did you get the idea for this book?
I guess I can speak to that. Well, I had just finished Mother of Invention, which was a big imaginative leap for me, set in the future, somewhat dystopian, sort of speculative novel, very much out of my comfort zone, and really taxed the outer limits of my ability to create a world. So when Julia agreed to write this new book with me, I knew that I wanted the setting to be, the world to be right under my nose. I wanted a break from making everything up. And I'm something of a gym rat. I, at the time, had coerced Julia into joining me, and we were both going to a circuit training gym routinely. And, as writers and sort of perennial outside observers, we found ourselves just continuously sort of delighted, incredulous, horrified by the gym world and fitness culture, which just has its own value system. It has its own lexicon. It's very earnest and cheesy in a way that is not natural to Julia and me. But yet we found ourselves kind of getting into it. So I just thought how much fun it would be to set a book in that world. And I also like the fact that the gym is sort of its own contained ecosystem. So it was a nice container for the book.
Yeah. I mean, Caeli is really, as Mel in the book would say, a worker outer,
COVID has changed this, but I used to be.
And I was kind of, somewhat fresh from my Brooklyn life, where I kind of, I walked a lot, but not a lot of intent. Like I hadn't, touched a weight in, I don't know, 15 years. And so this circuit training class was super intense. There was a lot of high-fiving strangers, it was really, and the lexicon, I mean, I would just look at Caeli and just in, just amazement The funny words and all the inspirational speeches. So I think that's why we decided to have, one character, Regina, really devoted and unfazed by the worker outer world. And Mel really just sort of in wonder of all of it.
Yeah.
And it did feel really great. I mean, I was healthy briefly, and I need to get back there. Possibly the pandemic is not the right time, but yeah, I sort of miss those. What are they called, Caeli? They're not cowbells.
Kettlebells.
Kettlebells.
Anyway.
Yeah, I had a time where I was a bit of a worker outer myself, although usually it was running and it was outside, and I don't get to do that as much anymore for various reasons. Emotional exhaustion, leaving my body open for physical exhaustion being a big part of that, and then the pandemic, which gives, existential dread and just overall exhaustion. Yeah, but it was kind of interesting, especially like when you're introduced to Zach in his element. I mean, I kept feeling like when you watch either an infomercial at 3 a.m. because you can't sleep. I don't know if that happens anymore. Today is my 41st birthday, by the way. So, yeah, thank you.
Happy birthday.
But when I was younger and I couldn't sleep in like the early to mid 90s, you'd turn on the TV and there were these either bizarre infomercials. There were mega churches, which it also reminded me a little bit of. You get all of these like almost like like carbonated inspirational speeches that didn't really mean anything, or at least I know they mean something to some people, but like for me I was like or Mama's Family was on with Vicki Lawrence, so so it depended on when I had insomnia. But really the first two were really just that sense that I got when Zach was like, okay, let's do this thing. What was he, so I guess he was probably inspired by some of the people that you saw.
Yeah, well, I think you're so spot on about I feel like the gym in many ways for a lot of Santa Monicans is it's like church. There's like a religious fervor that in the same way that religion, like controlling your mortality, right? Like I really feel that it's an existential devotion. They're also chasing the high of the Caeli, are they endorphins, I believe?
Yeah, correct.
But I think that's such a great comparison, and Caeli is a devotee, so maybe she could talk to that.
Well, yeah, and to answer your question, yes, I would say Zach was definitely an amalgam of many trainers we met and worked with, and many of whom genuinely and to my surprise really did inspire me, even though my critical mind is rolling its eyes, but I found myself getting kind of taken there to that place of optimism and a sense of exuberant control over my destiny that these trainers are able to impart. So definitely based on some real people.
And it was fun to write the scenes where Mel is just starting to take the circuit classes at the gym, because she starts out very resistant, cynical, and then she has this conversion, where she really goes for it. And it was really fun to write those scenes. I hope, we hope readers enjoy them because there's a lot of humor in them. But, I felt that. Kind of miss the gym / church.
Me too.
Yeah, I could see it, and I think like just with this big shutdown, it's probably changed so many lives
Oh, yeah.
in general. But you have, okay, so then Zach has a secret half sister, Letty, and the secret is she's an undocumented immigrant. And since they have the same mother, but Zach has a different father and he presents as white. And I believe his father adopted him.
Right.
Yes.
So he's, you know, he's
American.
American. But Letty is, you know, she has a son. She's terrified of ICE coming to, you know, basically destroy her life. And she's cleaning houses for these women, basically, that Zach trains. How did her story come about? I mean, I can think of how on my own, but from your perspective.
Let Julia take that one.
Well, early on, we knew very early on that Letty was going to be a character, and maybe, you know, I guess depending on the interpretation that readers have, a heroine, you know, a sort of heroine of the novel. And I do think if Letty wasn't in the novel, I just think it would lose so much meaning, because, you know, Santa Monica has, you know, all different, you know, people living different experiences here. And, you know, we were trying to write a book about secrets, and she is a very different kind of secret than, you know, the more privileged women in the book, like Mel and Regina. And she has a lot at stake. You know, she's worried about being deported, and she's a single mother to her young son who's disabled. And, you know, I mean, it's an experience that so many undocumented immigrants are having here that I just can't imagine not putting it within the story. It's happening to so many people who are very hardworking, tax paying, you know, members of the community. So.
Yeah, and I would just add that from a craft perspective, Letty was really invaluable because she was a way to kind of, you know, expose some of the you know, the dirtiness of these very polished women's privileged lives.
Yeah, who are basically, you know, able to do things. And I mean, what Letty does, it's honest work.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, she's in danger of being discovered, and, you know, she's kind of like the shadow of what these women are able to present.
Right.
I think visibility and invisibility, particularly of women, you know, has, you know, revealed itself to me now as a big theme in the book. You know, whether it's women who are 40 plus trying to be visible in a way that they think only younger women sort of
can officially call myself 40 plus, so I can say as of today I relate.
Much older. But also from a craft focused perspective, it's really fun for a writer, you know, writers to have a character like Letty who is so much more aware than the other characters in the book think she is. So it's kind of like a twist on dramatic irony, because the reader knows who Letty really is. She's smart, she's observant, you know, and all these other characters are, you know, really sort of treating her as if she's invisible.
Right.
So I think that's and, you know, it really has taken on a new meaning now after the pandemic for, you know, domestic workers who are really struggling and being forced to sacrifice their safety to continue working. And, Yeah, I don't know if did we know things were going to get this bad when we were writing the book? I don't know.
When did you write? So when did you start writing it? What was the process? Because that could kind of lead to what you had just said.
Caeli.
Let's see. So I'm trying. So I think we officially finished it so I think we wrote it in 2018 mostly. We read it in a year. We wrote it very quickly. So 2018, some of 2019, over the course of 11 months. And the way we wrote it was that we did a lot of planning, which is unusual for me, but we felt we had to be organized and strategic. Planned the plot, and then we divvied up the narrators. So I wrote Zach and Regina. Julia wrote Letty and Mel. And we were each sort of responsible for creating the first drafts for those characters. And so we moved through a first draft, each of us writing our character according to the outline. And then my favorite thing about our process is that we then switched. So we each have,
wow.
Well, so we each have like I think our own I don't know if superpower is the right word, but we both excel, right? And so whereas I am very comfortable writing dramatized scene and dialogue and action, and Julia's sweet spot is in interiority, exposition, emotional underpinnings. And so since those things are both necessary and resonant, but different, in switching, I was able to take Julia's scenes, which tended to live a lot in her character's head, and ground it in present action. And then she was able to take my scenes, which were too bound to the surface, and infuse it with thought and emotion. So we're like in combination, we're a complete author. So it was really, I think that's how we're able to do this. And, something that we're so proud of is that many readers have said that they can't tell who wrote what. So.
Yeah. I think that also, the ability to do that, to mind meld in that way, is really a product of the fact that we've spent so many years writing together, talking about books.
Yeah.
Caeli is the person that when I read something that I love that isn't too scary, because I like horror sometimes.
Oh, so do I.
I'll text her, and it's just, we have the most amazing literary conversations over text, so we learned how to write together. We learned how to read like writers together. But it is really, I hoped we would be able to do part of that, but really, the success of the mind melding is pretty miraculous to me. I think, I don't think there's really anyone else that either of us would be able to do this with. And
definitely
even
not.
our agents and my husband can't tell who wrote what. Sometimes I can't tell. And I'm like, oh, this is so great. You did a really good job in this section. Caeli's like, you wrote that.
I know.
So where did the name Cassidy Lucas come from? I actually see the name Cassidy behind Caeli, so yeah. Where did the name come from?
Hybrid of two of our children.
I was going to say, I wonder if that's the case. At first I was thinking to myself, oh, she has her one of the author names behind her. I'm like, oh no, wait a second. Yeah. How do your children feel being immortalized in that way?
I don't think they care.
I don't think they care either. I have 3 and Julia has 2, so the majority of our children were not, they're half were not included in the name. And when the publisher, we gave them a bunch of options, and they were all various configurations of blends of our kids' names. And when the publisher went with Cassidy Lucas, I, took my other two kids aside and was, ready to very gently break this to them and be ready to hear their feelings. And they were just could not have been. They were like, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. And your point is? Yeah.
I mean, being the children of novelists it's a burden. They have to listen to us basically talk about our silly ideas. My husband is also a writer, so my kids are like, when they fight, when they argue, they do these little comics together, and when they argue, my son's like to my daughter, he's like, I'm not publishing you anymore.
Because that's so great. I hope that one day this becomes like a webcomic through like a published comic, because how amazing would that be? I know one of my sons, he actually both of them, they kind of make up their own stories that they act out, but one of them writes like comics about like how he feels throughout the day. And I'd say being the child of a librarian, we have about 3 of our rooms in our house that are definitely filled with books, and probably books in every room of our house, so they're never not around books.
I felt like my kids were very lucky, even though I don't like their books encroaching on my book space. But, our libraries here just opened for curbside pickup. So, we went 6 months, 7 months without, we did use Overdrive, and Libby, which was really great, the apps that you can use to take out books. Mm-hmm. But I do think all of our kids have a real appreciation for storytelling, and when they're together, you can see that. Sadly, we can't really be together right now, but they really, it's clear that they love stories, and storytelling is a huge part of their personal expression.
Libby is kind of like the cool cousin who,
better, like a slicker app or whatever.
Overdrive still exists, and they're still, and they're like Overdrive and Libby, they're kind of the same thing, but there are definitely people who want nothing to do with Libby. But if I am on a train, which I probably won't be on a train for a very long time, and I want to download a book, let's just say, Libby is just the quickest way to do it. Mm-hmm. The search is easy, and you can just download the book in app and just read it in the app. My
kids take books out constantly, like mostly graphic novels, and then I take out I borrow audiobooks through the app. It's just really, it's amazing. One of the first things I did in mid-March when the school is shut down with like 3 hours notice was, send like the link to Overdrive and Libby to everybody that I knew to be like, quick, take out your ebooks.
Yeah.
Usage went up so much in the beginning of the pandemic and throughout. Now we're open with limited services, and you can come in and you can browse. And we also have a curbside called Library Takeout. But that was a really, first of all, that week in general was just crazy. And I have this really eerie picture of my kids. I had to pick them up early from preschool the day before everything shut down, for a reason that had nothing to do with COVID. It was just a family thing that was going on. And I'd been hearing about COVID. I had just been at the Public Library Association conference in Tennessee 2 weeks prior. And then it was just kind of like people were whispering about the coronavirus. And there were people who were freaking out about it. And then there were people who were like, oh, we get these viruses every so often. And, I don't think people realized, me being one of them, And this is probably from years of being a hypochondriac and thinking that if I had a rash, I had the skin-eating bacteria disease. So, like I came down from that and I was like, no, it's, like it'll be okay. Like, we got through the swine flu, we got through SARS, we got through avian flu, and then people just started dying.
Yeah.
And everybody started catching it and the panic was rising. And I had to go pick my kids up. Usually my mother would be doing it at that time. And they were 4 years old coming out of preschool and they're standing there with their friends. And I just felt compelled to take a picture. And that's the last time they've seen their friends.
Yeah, I think it was a very hard thing to accept. I run this in-person writing class school in New York. And the difference between Monday of that week when the students and the instructors were like, I'm fine with meeting in person, and Wednesday, which was just like a deluge of, I'm going to join, remotely, was really just shocking. And, I don't think the libraries are open for browsing. Are they, Caeli? Here in Santa Monica? They are for curbside.
I'm not sure if you can make an appointment yet. I don't know.
Here in LA,
I don't think so.
We're stuck in, we never sort of got over we're just,
You're still in the wave. There's no real first wave or second wave. It's just.
So, but speaking of the pandemic, we are working on a new book that should come out next October, so basically a year from now, and writing a book, a novel, or anything, I think, in this very sort of unknown future is a really incredible challenge. It works your imagination in ways that I don't think we ever expected. So our next book, The Canyon, which I'm going to let Caeli tell you more about it, is set in Topanga Canyon, which is very close to Santa Monica, and will be published next fall.
Yeah, it's sort of our take on a classic thriller setup, in that the plot revolves around a group of friends who go away together for the weekend. So in this case, it's a 50th birthday party, and it's a group of friends who knew each other in college, and now all live in Los Angeles and have various connections to Hollywood, to the entertainment industry. Anyway, they go to a remote property at the top of Topanga Canyon that one of the guests, the organizer of the weekend, who's a good friend of the birthday woman, has found on Airbnb. And the idea is that the weekend is a celebration of one of the main characters, Danny, but it's also a time for them to sort of reset and get back to the way they interacted, back in the 90s, pre-digital life, and they're not going to have their phones, and they're going to meditate and take hikes and sort of connect with the beauty that is Topanga Canyon. And they also have a plan to ingest a short-acting psychedelic to sort of enhance this experience, and make the whole thing sort of more momentous and celebratory. And anyway, of course, predictably, things go wrong, and turns out there are deep-seated festering secrets between this gang.
Resentment, a lot of resentment.
Yeah. So we wanted, and then yeah, I don't think it's a spoiler to say that some of the guests start disappearing or it's unclear, but the protagonist can no longer find some of her friends.
I can't wait to read that. That sounds
Yeah.
great.
So yeah, I mean, it's sort of, it's modeled after some classic novels that are structured similarly, but we plan to infuse it with some twists that hopefully will surprise readers.
Yeah. So we're very hard at work on that. And Topanga is a really beautiful place that, we talked about, Caeli mentioned the container of the gym setting. It's when you go up into Topanga Canyon during the day, and then at night, I mean, it is like, even I don't, I know many people that just won't drive up there at night. It's pretty isolated, but it's also, a mix of, sort of a little bit of like off the grid kind of, people, but also there's a lot of celebrities that have moved there and people in the entertainment business. So it's a mix of, it's just a really fascinating world.
Yeah,
and bobcats as pets.
That's. I mean, after Tiger King, I now give anybody the eye who has a big cat as a pet, even though I know bobcat. Yeah, it's that deeply disturbs me at the beginning of COVID.
Yeah. And I think, it's a completely separate novel from Santa Monica, but somewhat similar endeavor in the way that we looked at gym culture kind of with that mixture of, skepticism and kind of horror, but also being a little enamored of it. We're all now looking at this sort of culture of sort of, I mean, I don't want to call it new age seems diminishing, but sort of self-exploration. Southern Californians love journeys, and
all the journeys lead back to the self.
Right. And so, Topanga just seems like a perfect place to set this because it's, as Julia said, has a history of being, sort of a hippie enclave, and there's a mystical element, but it's also sort of remote and exclusive. So we want to sort of look into this sort of strange ecosystem the way we did with the fitness world.
It's also a beautiful setting. I mean, there's like, just masses of hummingbirds and, beautiful. I mean, they have a lot of fire danger up there, which is, and risk of like landslides and the rocks tumbling, but it is this very rugged beauty. It's just, we actually went there for my 40th birthday party, just a little group of us, and a very tame version of what is in the book.
Psychedelics.
And
wine.
And my husband and I spent the night, and the bedroom was like outside. I mean, I was a little, after living in Brooklyn for 15 years, I was like, okay, this is, and like we couldn't sleep because the coyotes were like having like an orgy or something in the canyon below. It was so loud. Even with earplugs, I couldn't, I was like, all right, let's go home now, even though it was so beautiful. But yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah, except for like, the mansions. So it's a really beautiful place if you can ever go and visit.
Well, I certainly hope to do that. It's funny, we recently interviewed Josh Mallerman, who was singing the praises of the Upper Peninsula for Michigan, and told me to put that on my list of places to go. Yeah. You're saying no.
No, no, I've actually heard the Upper Peninsula is gorgeous.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Yeah, no, I have. It just,
Remote.
remote. I'm scared to go anywhere that Josh Mallerman recommends.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I would understand that, although he is a lot of fun to talk to.
I'm sure.
Yeah, so now I have two beautiful natural places, although one I feel like is less remote than the other.
Yeah, because you can go to Topanga and then you can like go to the the beach in Venice and you
go to the Upper Peninsula and you're
not
there.
going in.
You're there. Well, I can't wait to read your next book. This one was really, really good. Are you writing separately, or are you going to stick with this formula for a bit?
We're doing this for the rest of our lives. No,
Awesome.
I think
That's great.
yeah. We didn't plan
Malibu.
Right. Yeah, we're just gonna make our way through all the Southern California communities.
I don't know that many other places in California still, so I'll just do whatever Caeli tells me to do. But we do have, I guess books that I think now that we've, it's so exciting to even say this, that we've published 3 books, I have projects that are kind of like the books I've wanted to write my whole life, and now I feel like I'm ready. So I don't know, I guess sort of in line with the pandemic life, it's hard to look forward and really have, and maybe in some ways that's the scariest part, is what does come next. And but we do feel really lucky to have had Harper and our editor Sarah Nelson want us to write 2 books.
Right. So I guess it's worth noting that we planned for this to be a one-off for both of us, just sort of this experiment to see if we could do it. And then when our agents took it out to sell, our editor Sarah Nelson wanted to make it a 2-book deal. So we just said, okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we hope.
How about Topanga?
Yeah.
We hope to see a lot more from both of you. Be together, separately. Come back when things are different, and visit Huntington and stop by Syosset Library.
I miss
Julia's home.
We'll be there.
Home turf. Thank you so much for having us. This was a blast.
This was wonderful. So once again, this was Jessica with Turn the Page podcast. Our guests today were
Caeli Wolfson Widger,
Julia Fierro, and
together we're
Cassidy Lucas.
And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.